Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to another Glacial Geek Deep Thoughts Thin Coats with me, Phil, the Glacial Geek. Today we are going to be working on putting down the black primer on those Vanguard vets I was working on last time. I finally put them together. I decided to go with one guy who just has a chainsword and bolt gun, just go with the bare basics one in case I just want to throw something in for one of the kill team formations that they have. Just gives me a little bit of flexibility if I just need a cheap way to get in there, because you can take them as, for those of you not familiar with the codex here, you can actually take Vanguard vets as it's the minimum squad size is one Vanguard vet, and he comes basically just attached, outfitted with the bolt pistol and the chainsword. So I can just take one, and that fulfills any requirements in the kill teams that require a team of Vanguard vets onto the kill team. You can just take it as one. So I decided to build up one as that. Decided to build up one as lightning claws, which I thought was just kind of a cool way. I did one that's just kind of interesting. I used some of the fancier bits. I used the head from the sprue that they come with, the Deathwatch sprue. I used that head and I put him on a guy that I gave a power fist and a grav pistol. I just thought if this guy's going out there, maybe immobilize the vehicle and then pound him with the fist would be pretty cool. Then I also made another one that's going to have a power maul and a storm shield. Just go up there, maybe concuss a guy really quick at initiative so that it just knocks some people down. And then he's got the storm shield to take shots as they're jumping in there. And I did another guy as the heavy thunderhammer, just because it's super cool. I love that weapon. It looks, just the thought of this thing, this massive hammer just coming in and just being beaten down. And being on a Vanguard vet, being able to shoot up the board and do that makes it a lot easier. I also built up two Terminators that I'm also going to be priming to get together. I've got one that has, I built one of the Meltifists that you have. It's a war gear that you can have in here. They modeled it up on one of the Terminators that comes in the Overkill box set. And basically it's a power fist with a built-in melt-a-gun. And you can shoot the melt-a-gun in the shooting phase and then punch them with a power fist, which is super cool. So I built up my own, and I found a way to build up my own because they don't come as a bit in any of the kits individually. So I built it. I took a chain fist. I cut off the chain part on the chain fist, and then I took the melta part from a combi melta, and I just cut off the front of the combi melta part there and attached it, and it fit, I mean, perfectly in there. So I've got a cool melta fist, and then I've just got a guy with with an assault cannon. They both end up being Dark Angel's Deathwing guys, so Deathwing in the Deathwatch, because those are the models that I had, and I didn't feel like buying any others, and I just need a couple that I can use just to fill in so I can run some of the kill team propers, which is kind of interesting. So I've got those guys ready to be primed. That's what I'm going to be working on. As for the discussion today, I am going to be talking what is on the mind of literally every single Warhammer player, 8th edition. I'm going to be talking about, it just blows my codexes out of the water. It's fallen over again because he is going to be of no use to me come a couple months. Going into 8th edition, there are a lot of big news drops that have been happening from GW themselves, as well as some information that's been coming out from some of the developers on Twitter, which is kind of interesting, and just piecing together some ideas that you can parse together. And I'm going to be talking about that, kind of what to expect with 8th edition based upon what they've said, and kind of extrapolating what I think makes the most sense that's going to be coming out. And you know, that's kind of what this discussion is going to be about, is just 8th edition and kind of what to expect with it coming forward. So get all aboard the hype train. Whoop whoop. Next destination is 8th edition. So they made the announcement that 8th edition will be coming out. They haven't said when. They said this year, but putting it together based upon the fact that they said they're going to come out with an article every day leading up to the release of 8th edition, and the fact that there were rumors previously that 8th edition was going to drop sometime around June. I would expect it coming out sometime in June. I don't think they're going to draw out this release expectation further than that. I don't think you're going to see it. At most, I would imagine July. June or July, I would expect to see it. I don't think much further than that, because I just don't see them drawing it out much further than that. You know, because they're going to have a major drop, I imagine, in sales of everything that they're doing right now, leading up to the release of 8th. So they're not going to want to put themselves in that kind of situation when they've already announced the new edition's coming out, so they don't have a whole lot of income coming in from the old edition, and they're not going to have any income coming in from the new edition because it's not out yet. So just putting that together, I would imagine June, July is when I would expect to see it come out. They had the announcement that they made, and coming out, they've also had a Q&A already talking about some of the things to expect. One of the things they talked about is that this is basically going to be a hard reset on the rules for Warhammer. So it's not just going to be like the change from 6th to 7th, where they changed a few things, but basically everything worked, you know, where we carried on with a lot of our codexes, things like that. This is going to be a hard reset. So none of the codexes, none of the rule books are going to be applicable in 8th edition that are working now in 7th edition, which is pretty big. You know, there's a lot of people that are a little upset, are pretty upset about that, and understandably so. But to kind of make up for that, they announced that they will provide vouchers for GW for the purchase of any rulebook that you've made in the 8 weeks previous to the announcement. So a lot of people talked about, oh, I just bought this book. Why am, you know, now I'm going to buy a whole new edition. GW says, yeah, we hear you, dog. Here's a voucher so you can use it towards purchasing things when 8th edition comes out, or you can use it to purchase models. You can use it to do whatever you want, change over to Age of Sigmar, whatever fits your desires. You now can do it. It's going to be a voucher for it, so you don't have to worry about being stuck, and you get to keep the book. So they're not asking you to return the book. They're just going to give you credit towards it as long as you can show proof of purchase. So even from local gaming stores, so your friendly local gaming store, your FLGS, as long as you've got a receipt to a proof of purchase that you bought it in those 8 weeks previous, you're good to go. Someone pointed out that the third Gathering Storm book actually came out within that period. So if you bought that at all, let alone you know, you can actually get some credit for that. So you just have to call up and call up their call center. There's different call centers around the world. You go call different call centers, and they will help you get the voucher for it. So as long as you've got proof of purchase that occurred within the 8 weeks previous, you can get credit for it, which is pretty cool. They said they usually do 4 weeks, but because of this being a big hard reset, they're doing it 8 weeks, which is, I think, a pretty good move on their part. It's going to keep people from being upset about it, because now you don't have a reason to be upset. You get to keep the book that you bought. You can still play it. It still has all of the background information is not being dropped, so they're not doing what they did to Warhammer Fantasy Battle where they just blew it up. They're going to keep the same story, keep the same universe, keep everything going. They're just going to push the story forward and change the rules. So you can keep it for all of the lore. You can use it for the basis for some of the different gameplays, which I'll get to in a bit. Anything like that, you can just keep using them. But you'll get credit so that you can go and use that same money that you thought you were buying the book for to get into 7th edition. You can then use it to go and purchase and buy 8th edition stuff, which I think is it's pretty cool. So yeah, so a hard rule set. They're changing the way things are going. It's not going to be the exact same system that they've been going on since like the big changes in the past. This is going to be a hard new rule set. They also announced that the rules are going to be available for free. The basic rules are going to be available for free, which is something they tried, which they did when they came out with Age of Sigmar, was release the rules for free. And later they came out with like the handbook, the General's Handbook that you could use. So you have an actual book if you like that. But the rules themselves are just going to be available to everybody for free at launch, which is pretty cool. Let you get right back into the game. They're also going to have rules for every model that they have, that they carry, available at launch. And they said they're going to be available in cheap books. 5 books are going to come out with all the different rules. So I think they also, so they might be, I can't remember if they said those are going to be for free or not, but they said they're going to be available for cheap. So I imagine they're just going to sell the tomes at a discounted price so that they can let everyone get back into the base system so they can get back into playing without having to wait for a whole bunch of codexes to slowly trickle out. They also it also came out that codexes are not dead, so they are going to be coming out with codexes, but at the beginning there, they're going to have these tomes so you can get back to using the models that you have, but later on they'll be releasing codexes for the different factions and the different armies. They've also announced that no army is going to get squatted, so they're not going to suddenly drop all of the new armies that you've got. So if you went out and bought a bunch of Genestealer Cult or a bunch of Death Watch, they will be supported in the new system. Everything is going to be supported, including Forge World. Forge World's going to come out with rules, renewed rules for all of their all the stuff that they do as well, which is really interesting and kind of cool. So at launch, everything will be available, so you can get right back into it without any kind of real delay. They've then getting into how they are going to change it. They said that they're going to have a couple different ways of playing the games. They're going to come out with 3 different ways. There's open play, there is narrative play, and then there is match play. Open play is you just put your models down. That's what Age of Sigmar originally was. You put down whatever models you want, whatever models you have, and you just kind of play against your friends' models. It's meant to be a way to get it quickly into the game, so you can just play with whatever you have without having to really get into the nitty-gritty about building armies, building lists, anything like that. It's just meant to be, I've got my toys, you got your toys, let's just throw them on the table and let's have some fun. And you roll some dice and you go at it. I mean, I don't know if I'm going to be doing that so much. It's basically Unbound is what it's talking about, without worrying about worrying about points. So balance isn't, if you're worried about balance at all, that doesn't seem like the system that you'd want to use. So, but at the same time, the fact that they have it available and they're talking about it is kind of interesting, because, you know, as much as you could just do that now with 7th edition if you so desired, the fact that the company's coming out and saying, yeah, that's a legitimate thing that you can just do. Just throw them down there, have fun, and just, you know, go at it. Roll some dice and see what happens. You can just create scenarios that you want to do. So you're like, all right, I'm just going to keep throwing 1,000 million Hormigons at your tactical squad. Let's see how long they're going to last. And you just keep going at it until the tactical squad's dead. At that point, balance isn't really an issue. You're just kind of trying to play out a situation and see what happens. Or you can have, they talked about it being like the who would win kind of situation, sort of like mini wargaming did. You can just throw 2 guys there. He's like, all right, who would win? A tactical squad kitted out with some weapons, or is it going to be a squad of Harlequins? You know, the points may not add up exactly, but you can just throw down the models there. That's what it's designed to do. It's just for you to get in there, have some fun, throw around with a kind of an interesting, different kind of take on it, and it allows you to just do it. And yeah, you can argue that you can do that now with 7th edition, and it's true, you can. I mean, Mini Wargaming did do that. But what this does is has the company coming out and kind of endorsing that kind of way of play and showing that they intended that all of their models get used in a bunch of different ways. There's no official way for you to that you have to play the game with. You know, this isn't a board game. There's not a set rules that you have to use with it. You do you. You have fun. You do whatever you want to do. But they did mention that they're going to have 2 sets of points that are going to be coming out with each of the different entries for the different models. And it was meant to be used in 2 different ways, because they have 1 set of points that is a little looser, so it basically gives a point value for a unit, and then you can kit them out however you want. So if you've got, you know, if you want to run these cool guys, if I wanted to run my Vanguard vets here, as opposed to trying to figure out what each of the different point values are for them to balance off, you can be like, all right, Vanguard vets are 50 points, whatever it is that they're going to do. And you can just go, your opponent can go, all right, well, I'll have squads worth of 50 points. And it doesn't get into the nitty-gritty, the granular nature of putting in war gear, but it just gives you a basis for those things, so it gives you a fair semblance of balance, so that you're not going to get into it and just be blown out in like 10 minutes into this massive narrative idea that you had. You've got an idea of what's really somewhat balanced, so you can have a full game, you can have an interesting game that you can keep going with. but not have to get into the nitty-gritty of balancing out. You know, it's like, oh, well, I'm 1 point over our point value, so I'm going to have to rework this list. It's like, no, I'm just going to take these. It comes out to, you know, it balances out to what you've got there, even though the weapons would technically take it over or make something different, you know. And yeah, it could be, you could say it could get abused, but, you know, the fact is that if you're going to be playing someone with that, odds are they're your friend, and they're not going to be a complete tool bag. And you can talk to them about the fact that maybe giving every single guy on your army there a grav cannon is a bit unfair, and I don't think that's going to make for a fun game. And you can talk about it, and you can discuss it, and you can be like, all right, well, how about I just give a couple of guys that, and then I give the others, you know, feather dusters, so that it kind of balances out. And you go, okay, yeah, that works. Then I'm gonna give my guys, you know, a couple weapons as well that work out, and I think it'll allow us to just have a fun, balanced game, which is the whole point of anything that you're doing here. But it gives you a basis so that you're not sitting there going, well, how close is this based upon what we have here? Are we just going to get, you know, 5 minutes into this game and then want to throw our models away because it's boring because one guy just destroyed the other? So I think that's really interesting, and that's, they said, designed for more of the narrative ideas, the more narrative campaigns, which was one of the gameplays that they talk about, and it's meant to be reliving the you know, retelling the quote-unquote historical battles of Warhammer 40,000. So, you know, if you want to relive the Battle of Badab, you can do that with this system, and you don't have to get into the grain. It's like, well, you know, I don't know how many guys now I can give these melty guns to. They should really have them. It's like, cool, do it. You've got 5 tactical squads. They're all 50 points each. So you've got, you know, you got 250 points there. It's like, all right, well, then I'm going to take, you know, 250 points worth of bros, and it works out approximately similar, and you're in it at that point not to win and lose. You're in it at that point to kind of tell a story and have fun with the game, and that's what that allows you to do, is so that it's going to be a fun game that you can have, but you don't have to get into the granularity of how many, you know, if I'm 3 points more than you, you know, that's not going to work out. It allows you to just go at it and just be like, that's basically what we've got here, you know. And I guess technically you could do that. You could just be like, you know, how many points is a tactical Marine squad? But it's kind of cool that they have that system in place there to emphasize that if you're just going for these narrative campaigns, you're not really a narrative story. You're not looking to be, you know, hyper competitive, trying to find the best general. You're just kind of trying to have fun, play with your toys, and do it. You can do it. The other point value is going to get more granular. So that's the point match system that they have, the match gameplay, which is basically the gameplay that we all know and either love or hate right now with 7th edition, where you buy your soldiers, you buy your war gear, everything comes out points, and you work it out within a set point system. So those are the 3 different types of gameplays. They did mention that they've tried to streamline the game so that now, as of right now, they said in 7th edition, about a 1,000 to 2,000 point game, or I think it was like 1,500 point game, they said takes about 2 hours, approximately 2 hours to complete. At this point, they're going to drop it down so that you can complete that in 90 minutes, which is I mean, an additional half hour saved in that, which is really cool. You know, because that's one of the complaints that people have, especially in the tournament circuit, is that, oh, we can't finish games because of everything that's going on. Well, they've streamlined the game so that hopefully the same amount of time that you spend playing in a tournament, you can actually complete a bunch of games, as opposed to having games end in turn 3 or turn 4 or something like that. This allows you to get through a whole game. And if you're not even worried about a tournament, if you're just looking for your friends, you don't have to dedicate an entire day to playing a game. You get to do it in an evening. So you can meet up after work and play and not, you know, miss your bedtime and get to sleep at a decent hour, as opposed to staying up till 12 o'clock at night, filming a battle report and making your friend just keep the store open until you can finish doing it, like I may have done last night. So that's the basis of what they've got going on here. It's meant to be streamlined. It's meant to be a quicker game, an easier game. It's meant to allow people to get into the game better, so people who have been out of the system for a long time, or people who are just new and fresh coming into it. It gives them a lot of different options of how to get into it, so you can play the smaller games, which, I mean, I think they've been emphasizing anyway when they've came out with Kill Team, when they came out with Shadow Wars. There's been an emphasis on playing the game how you want to play in the amount of time that you have to play, And that's what they seem to be emphasizing again with this 8th edition drop, which is really cool, and I think a fantastic way to go about it. And I think it's going to make for a good system. I'm on the hype train. I am all about what's been going on. They've also talked about the fact that that they're getting rid of certain things that have been around for a while. So templates are no longer going to be part of the game. So you're not going to have to worry about, is that guy's toe underneath the template? Is he underneath it? Oh, I don't know. If you know, is this where it's scattered to? I feel like you're pushing the game. You don't have any arguments about that anymore. The things will shoot, and they have, I guess the way they do it now in Age of Sigmar is that there's a randomized number of wounds that get delivered based upon, a die roll. Which is cool. You don't really have much, usually you don't have many arguments over a die roll. A die roll is a die roll. You can worry about cocking or whatever. But the number of times that I've had it there where you have someone saying, oh, no, this hits all the guys under there. And it's like, whoa, I think it's missing a couple because of this. It's like, oh, I don't think you scattered over there properly. Look at the way you're holding the, look at the direction that the arrow is actually in. You're not holding the arrow, you're not holding the ruler right. A lot of arguments that go on with that kind of stuff, and it's, even if you're being friendly about it, you still, you sit there and you're like, you want to win, and if you have this situation where it's going on, subconsciously people do it. So have you ever seen someone where they're measuring and all of a sudden they move the measure a bit as they're moving the template forward? That kind of stuff. You don't have to worry about that anymore because that's not going to be a thing anymore. They're also going to get rid of scatter die completely. So you're not even, for deep strike, you're no longer going to have that. I heard someone say that you basically just deploying outside of 9 inches from an enemy unit, or from, I guess I would imagine enemy. You imagine you could be closer to friendlies, but as long as you just basically deploying, so sort of like the cult ambush kind of stuff, where you can just deploy. It's basically infiltrating in the middle of a game, during the middle of a turn, during the movement phase, which I think is kind of cool too, because that was always an issue where it's like, it's like, oh, no, they can totally be deployed here. And it's like, I don't know, I feel like you scattered a little too close to that wall. I don't think you've got them there. And then you have to worry about, did they mishap? Did they not mishap? Here, it's like you place them, there's no real argument. You're just placing them. So I think that's going to streamline the game, because you always would have those issues. You call over the TO and be like, this is where he was. This is what the scatter was. What's going on? And you have to make a call. And, it doesn't have to be angry. You're just trying to get it right so that you can play and both be competitive with it. Because, those kind of situations can come up and make a difference. So you just want to make sure it's done right. You get someone come in, make a call, and you go with it. But in this case, taking that away means that you no longer have to worry about that. You can just go ahead with the game that you're playing, and there's going to be less arguments, which makes for a streamlined game. So I think that's kind of cool. So no more scatter dice, no more templates. It's just going to make things kind of go smoother. And I think those two things getting removed from the game is actually going to seriously streamline the game and streamline the way things go. So I think that's going to be, I'm all for that. I think it's going to be interesting to see, and people are like, well, how do you, it doesn't seem very thematic. And it's like, yeah, maybe, but I think that you can have the situation here where, the whole idea is that your squads are not supposed to be static. They're moving, they're running, they're in the middle of battle. And to say that, like, well, if I shot my flamer this way, it would have hit all of them. It's like, well, all of a sudden they see that flame coming and they start to scatter a bit. So now you just have a random number that get hit from there. So you're going to have more hits than you would have if you've got auto hits still, like you would have had with a flamer, but it's a random number of hits versus however many you can fit underneath that template. And it's also going to shut down, you no longer have to worry about the guy that goes out there and measures that, make sure his deployment is exactly 2 inches. Each of his units, or each of the models, are exactly 2 inches away to maximize the distance, so that when the blast template comes down, no longer have to worry about that. So people can just push their blobs together. You don't have to worry about it, and it makes things. I think it's going to speed up the game, speed up this the gameplay, and speed up just a lot of stuff. I think it's going to be really fantastic for that. So yeah, so those are gone. They're also getting rid of the standard movement. There's no longer a standard movement. Each model is going to have a movement value that they can move, which I think is fantastic. I think it's really thematic. I think it's really a good idea, so that you have now where you know, a Space Marine is going to go a certain distance, and Eldar are probably going to go faster. And then they said, and Hormagaunts are going to go even faster. So that each of those different models can fit into what it's supposed to be. You know, the Hormagaunts are supposed to be like these little skittering little things that are just like running through and just charging up there. And the Eldar are supposed to be lithe and light on their feet and able to get around like that. So all of this allows you to, it provides a bit more of a thematic difference between the models, which is cool because, you know, why does everything move 6 inches? You know, I don't even move as fast as every single person around me. But, so why should every single, you know, non-monstrous creature, non-bike move the exact same distance in the period of time that they're talking about for a movement phase? So I think that's kind of cool. It'll be a different thing. You don't have to memorize all of them because they're all going to be, and that's another thing, all the information for each of the different units is going to be on their own entry, which is, you know, sort of like the war scrolls they have for Age of Sigmar. So that everything's going to be in the same place. You don't have to worry about looking it all up. It's all going to be there. You don't have to worry about it. Apparently, the main rules are going to be 12 pages long versus the tome that they have now for 7th edition. 12 pages is really small. It's not 4 pages like Age of Sigmar, so there's a little bit more complexity than that. But it's a lot less complex than 7th edition, which I think is going to be much welcomed, or at least I'm going to much welcome it, you know, so I don't have to sit there. And I mean, I play, you know, usually around at least 2 games a week so that I can get enough games so I can have my battle reports. On average, I guess 2 games a week. With that in mind, I still look up the rules in the rule book all the time because there's a lot of rules. It's a lot of rules to remember. There's no way I can memorize it all. And I play a lot. I play more than probably most anyone else. And that's most people out there. And that's not to brag. It's just the reality of the situation because I'm trying to keep together a YouTube channel that you're not doing. So when you play that many games, you start to learn a lot of the rules. But if I'm still looking up rules, then I can almost guarantee you everyone else is doing the exact same thing. And there's times when I misremember rules. That's just the reality of what happens, you know? And if you look at my comments section, I forget rules all the time. If the rule system is only 12 pages long, odds are I'm going to be misremembering a lot less rules because they're going to be 12 pages long. A lot easier to keep all of that information in my head, and I can still look back at it, and I'm not going to be spending a lot of time looking back at it because I just got to look through 12 pages worth of rules, main rules, to figure that all out, which I think is fantastic. I'm very much looking forward to that. What else did they talk about? Oh, they talked about the fact that to hits are no longer going to be measured against each other. So everyone's going to have a standard weapon skill and ballistic skill that is the die value that you have to get on the dice. So they showed the entry for a Space Marine, Tactical Space Marine, and he had a weapon skill of 3+ and a ballistic skill of 3+. But they did mention, they haven't, at least as far as when this came out, they haven't really shown how that's all going to interact. But they did say that that there will be modifiers to these things, so that certain things are going to be harder to hit, other things are going to be easier to hit, and that's going to make they're going to become modifiers onto the die as opposed to measuring off against each other. You know, because someone pointed out the fact that everyone, there's a lot of people who are like, well, why if I have a really high weapon skill, I feel like that's really nerfing my unit. But in reality, if you had a weapon skill of like 7, and you went up against a Tactical Marine of weapon skill 4, you're hitting on 3s, they're hitting on 4s. You get one more pip on the dice, one more set on the die that works for you that doesn't work for them, and that's it. Compared to the almost double their weapon skill, which is supposed to be almost double as, doubly as skilled with a close combat weapon, and you're rolling one side of a die better than them. It didn't really represent that at all. So this, you're going to have a standard one that you have, and based upon who you're hitting and who you're attacking, you're going to have modifiers on that. So that someone who is really good in combat will probably put a lot of modifiers onto the enemy that's trying to hit them. So suddenly that 3+ that the tactical would usually hit is probably going to go up to a 4 or 5. Whereas yours is probably not going to go up as much based upon the fact that you're skilled and they're, not as skilled. So I think that's a really cool way of going about it. Makes it a lot easier. You don't have to keep looking up the charts. I mean, you know, I didn't have to look it up after a while, but it's right there. So which makes it easier for someone coming into the game or someone new to the game and someone working with different models. It's right there, which is brilliant in my opinion. So what else did they talk about? Oh, this is another big one. There are no longer armor values on vehicles. They are going to be treated the exact same way as basically everything else. So they're going to have the same kind of stat values as everyone else, which I think is kind of interesting. That one I'm not sure. I've never really tried it. Apparently they do a similar thing in Age of Sigmar, where vehicles just have a whole lot of wounds. So, you know, and they said that the stats are no longer maxed out at 10 anymore. So you have, you know, vehicles that can have dozens of wounds on there. So your Land Raider is going to have, they said dozens. So you can have a Land Raider there that's probably going to have, you know, 24 wounds or something like that. Or a Knight that's going to have 24 wounds. So you no longer have just the 4 hull points that if you manage to get through, it's dead. The idea was to keep them on the table longer doing things. But another thing they talked about is that as they start to take damage, they're going to start losing their ability to do certain things, which is really cool. Something that a lot of my friends who play Age of Sigmar have really been celebrating from the game, is that they have it so that, you know, as you're playing, as you start taking wounds, so that Giant Monsters creature, as he starts taking more and more wounds in combat, or as he gets shot more and more, he doesn't become as effective. So there's certain things that happen that, you know, you don't get to, it's not as easy to hit anymore because you're hurt. Or as a vehicle, as you've got some damage there, so it doesn't become, you can't move as far, you can't move as fast, you don't get to hit or shoot as well. I think that's really interesting, and I think that's a really cool way to put it, because that's the reality, you know, like these vehicles and these monsters shouldn't be the exact same thing until they're just dead. It's not alive or dead. That's not the reality. A lot of the thing is that they're tough and they can keep going, but they're going to be taking damage and they're going to become less effective because, you know, as you shoot and they start taking damage on this table, they start to lose their effectiveness, which is the way it should be. This is the way it would be in, you know, reality. Not that this is based in reality necessarily. It's just, you know, having those kind of aspects that have a bit more of a narrative twist to it, thematic twist to it. I think it's good. I think it's positive for the game. I think it's positive for the system, and I think it's something that we should be looking forward to. I think it's something that's going to be good. But yeah, they said that, you know, there's nothing that can't hurt anything else. So as someone pointed out, they were like, you know, so you're telling me that guardsmen with their las guns can take down a Land Raider? That doesn't seem right. Like, how many? And it's like, well, it would probably take a whole lot to do it. And they said, well, like, how much are we talking about here? How whole lot? Because they've got the ability to have like 50 men in a blob that are going to be shooting and taking down this Land Raider, and the people on the moderators on the Warhammer Facebook group said maybe put a 0 on there, so 500 guardsmen could probably take it down. But there is the thematic reality that you see in the narrative, in the books and stuff like that, where, you know, maybe a lucky guardsman shot with his las gun is able to take off the last hull point on that on that Land Raider, keeping it from stopping it from marching and crushing through their lines. And that's cool. I think that's really interesting, because the number of times I've been in situations where it's like, well, none of my weapons can do anything against this. I've just got to sit back and just take it and just get beaten by whatever he has and hope that I can survive and outmaneuver him, which is boring. You know, when you're running away and you can't shoot with your weapon, or the guy's just sitting there out in the open going, like, basically taunting you the fact that, you know, your bolters can't touch my guy. There's nothing you can do. And it's you know, that's frustrating. So no longer have to face that. And the odds of me being able to damage it may be really low, but there's always a chance. And if you give me a chance, I'm going to get excited about it. And I'm probably going to try to do it. And I will probably woo if I do. So I think that's a pretty big change. And I think it's kind of interesting. I think it'll be fun. The fact that everything's going to be able to do something. And I think, you know, I don't think they've taken away a lot of the thematic purpose in that. I think there's a lot of things that can keep going, and I think it sounds like this game is super balanced. They've been working on this for years at this point, apparently. So they've been working on this for years, and they've had the guys at Frontline Gaming, the guys who run the LVO. They've had the guys, the people from Adepticon and the Nova Open, a lot of the big you know, the big gaming gaming conventions and tournaments, helping out with play testing and giving ideas and trying to work out this system. And I think that's fantastic. Those are the guys who are in the trenches that see the games. They don't have to just sit back and you know, I feel like there's, you know, they've got that competitive edge to them, and they're going to have feedback on what they can do and what's going to happen and what they think should happen in the game. So that's all been going into this new system. So apparently this is going to be one of the most balanced games that they've had in a long, most balanced systems that they've had in a long time. And it makes sense also because the fact that they're having this hard reset where everyone's getting their new rules at the exact same time, you don't have to worry about codex creep. You know what I mean? You don't have to worry about the fact that, you know, it's like, oh, my codex was the first one to come out in this new edition, and then things get changed. You know what I mean? As they happen, everyone's coming out at the same time. Everyone's going to have a similar level of power, and I think it's going to allow for a lot of things to be more viable than they necessarily were in 7th edition. I think it's going to give a lot more openness, a lot of ability to try out new things, and I'm excited for that. I'm excited for the plethora of different units that I think we're probably going to see on the table now, because there's not just going to be that one system that works anymore. I think that all of these guys are going to be a little bit more balanced, a little bit more parity between the different armies, parity between the different units, with people having their benefits and having their weaknesses. That I think the lists are probably going to be a bit more varied because things will be able to be run. You know what I mean? It may not be the gameplay that everyone wants to do, but it will be out there, and the ability to hold their own is going to be fun. I'm excited about that. I think it's going to provide a lot of variety in the game, and I think it's going to provide a lot of I don't know, just a lot of fun, a lot of opportunities to expand and further look into different ways of doing the game. What else have they talked about? I don't know. Those are a lot of the big ones that they've talked about. You know, like I said, codexes are going to be the current codexes aren't going to be applicable anymore, but they're going to come out with things quick so you can play all the different units. They talked about pushing the story forward, which is, I know, not necessarily what's on everyone's mind right now, but I think that's kind of cool. I think it'll be interesting to see what they do forward. They said they're not going to like completely, you know, just crush everything, and they're not going to change the way the story's been told. They're just going to push the story forward so we can see more things happening. I think it'll be interesting to see if they continue bringing some of the Primarchs back, both the demon ones and the loyalist ones. I think it'll be interesting to see what kind of story gets told with all of these guys. So it'll be interesting. It'll be interesting to see what happens, and it will. I don't know. I'm excited. I'm all aboard the hype train. I think it's going to be fantastic for the game, and I think it's, you know, it's time for something new. There's a lot of people complaining about 7th edition, about it not being balanced, about it not being fair. You know, people getting upset about different ways in the system. So we're coming out with a new system now, you know, and people are, you know, I mean, anytime you change anything, you're going to have people that are going to be upset. But everything they've come out and said, everything that they've mentioned, everything that they've indicated with both coming out and saying and what they've referenced, I feel like it's going to be good. There's nothing that they've said, there's nothing that's come out that I'm violently upset about. You know, there's nothing that has left me questioning really hard as to why they made the decision that they did. Everything seems to be well thought out, everything seems to be well considered, and they're doing it in the right way. You know, if they're going to take away our codexes, then they know that they're going to come out and have a way for us to get back into the game without having to spend all that money on those codexes again. And, you know, the reality is, new codexes has always been part of the system. You know, how many times have they updated codexes that we've had to buy a new one? You know, I've got my 6th edition Dark Angels codex sitting over there on the bookshelf, not doing anything for me right now. And, you know, I didn't really complain when that happened. It's just a new codex. It's the reality of what happens. Yeah, sure, it's all happening at the same time now, but I think they said they're going to come out, so the rules are going to come out, so you don't have to spend all the money on a billion different codexes. They said, you know, most people will only have to buy 1, maybe 2 of the tomes that are coming out so that they can play. I'm wondering if I'm going to have to buy the 2, since I'm going to have to buy probably the Imperial one and probably the Xenos one so that I can run my Gene Stealer cult. But that's fine by me, you know. It's 2 books. I'd be interested to see them anyway. I think it'd be cool. So yeah, that's kind of what's going on. It's an exciting time. I think there's a lot of cool things that are going to happen. I think that this system is going to be very balanced. From what they've said, it sounds like they're opening things up. They're trying to make it so that everyone is rebalanced. They're redoing the point values. They're remaking the way things work, so that everything kind of has its place and everything has its worth. And if you don't like it, then you don't have to take it, just like you would here. But it sounds like everything can be effective if you want it to be, which is cool. Oh, another big change, this is a big one, is that they're changing how close combat works. So that close combat is now going to be whoever charges gets to hit first. Which I've had the discussion that kind of came out previously. It was rumored to come out or they had actually released that they were going to think about doing it in the next system. But now it's kind of come out officially that charges are going to go first. So they've gotten rid of initiative now because they don't have initiative on the entries anymore. They just have whoever charges gets to hit first, which is interesting. A lot of people, are not super happy about that, but I think it's kind of interesting. I think it's kind of cool. I think that the armies that were really high initiative are probably going to have a higher movement value so that they can position themselves to get that charge off better and charge off easier, so that they can get those first strikes on now instead of having a higher initiative in the combat. And then afterwards, they're going to do what they do in Age of Sigmar, which is alternating units that are going to be done, so that on your turn you're going to go first, but that the alternating units are going to go so that I choose a unit that activates, then you choose a unit that activates, and then I choose a unit that activates, and alternating back and forth like that, so that it's not like going to be so you can choose what gets to punch in there, which is kind of cool. It makes it a bit more tactical decision. A lot of my friends who play Age of Sigmar say that it's a tactical decision that kind of gets overlooked a lot, but it can make a big difference on how you activate units in close combat and how you get into close combat. It just changes the way you think about it a little bit. So I think it's interesting. I think it's kind of cool. It's a good way to do it. They've also mentioned that it's not going to be random turns, so you don't have to worry about that. That was something people were worried about with Age of Sigmar, which was the random turns thing, where at the beginning of the turn you roll off. Basically, you roll first turn every turn. So who goes first every turn? So they said that's not going to be a thing in here, but that's still going to stay with Age of Sigmar. But in 8th edition, that's not a thing. So you don't have to worry about that coming over from Age of Sigmar. There's a lot of people that talk about that Warhammer is getting it's being turned into Age of Sigmar. That this is becoming the Age of the Emperor. And I think that the big problem I have with this is the way you look at it and consider the reality of the game system. A couple years ago, you had Warhammer Fantasy Battle and you had Warhammer 40K. 2 very distinct, very different games. But they got rid of Fantasy Battle and they created Age of Sigmar. And a lot of people kind of conflate the two. That Age of Sigmar is fantasy, but they're not. They're very different games. They play very differently, but they use similar themes. And they moved from the line battles and the group battles that Fantasy Battle used to be into the skirmish game that 40K is. So they decided that they wanted to move that direction, and it seems to have worked for them. A lot of people are still upset about that, but Games Workshop moved that way. I think, as opposed to 40K turning into Age of Sigmar, I think what they did was they turned fantasy into 40K. It's basically, they're both skirmish systems, they're both D6 skirmish systems, which is you're going to have a similar gameplay to each of them. So I don't think that they're turning 40K into Sigmar. I think they turned Sigmar into 40K, and which is fine. I think it's good, because what you have is a situation now where you have a gameplay system that they can then focus on and work with, and they don't have to think about things too drastically different. They can kind of share and move back and forth, which is what they're trying to do with this, and make this more of a living rule system that's going to have feedback from the players, feedback from the community. They can have both the feedback coming from both different games that can help and build each other, which is a brilliant idea for them. That means that their research doesn't have to expand into two different directions. They can just build on the same kind of premise. But you have two vastly different thematic choices for these games. So you have Age of Sigmar, which is your fantasy battle. So if you like the high fantasy gaming, Age of Sigmar's for you. You know, you've got guys with swords and shields and spears. You've got, you know, creatures that are coming up. Then you have 40K, which is futuristic space battles. So you've got aliens and you've got dudes in suits of power armor shooting giant guns at each other. They're very thematically different, and it allows you to choose the theme that you like, the theme that excites you. So if you're excited painting up a whole bunch of guys with bows and arrows, then you go with Age of Sigmar. If you're excited about painting a bunch of guys with guns, you can do Warhammer 40,000. And I think that, for me, that was always the big difference between fantasy and Warhammer, was the thematic differences. Sure, the gameplay was very different, but thematically it was, to me, the big difference maker between the two. And now it's literally just a thematic issue. There's going to be differences in the rules, the way they've done them. They haven't completely just ported over Age of Sigmar. They've taken a lot of things they like, and they've left a lot of things they didn't, and they've added some complexity to the system to appeal to the 40K players. But essentially now the difference is thematic, and I think that's fantastic. I think that's awesome. I think people can get excited about playing like that, and it's easier now to have the two systems playing similar to each other. So if you know one, you can get in and start playing the other and feel comfortable. You don't have that big gap where I never wanted to do Fantasy Battle because I never wanted to learn that whole new system that was very vastly different. But with the release of the Karadan Overlords, I've been thinking about Age of Sigmar. And now at this point, I'm going to know the system once I get 8th edition down. So it makes that transition in there easier, which I think is fun. So you can have a variety of different ways that you play, a variety of different models that you paint and collect. So that's kind of what I see coming forward. I'm very excited by 8th edition. Everything they've said is very positive in my opinion. Everything that they've mentioned I think is benefiting to the game as opposed to detracting from the game. And I just feel very positive. There was a lot of, once they started talking about and rumors started coming out about 8th edition, there was a lot of salt, a lot of ill feelings about what they were going to do and how they were going to ruin 40K. But now that they've come out and they've actually said some concrete things that they're going to change, that has settled out. I haven't seen as much of that. I see more people complaining about the salt than the actual salt. At this point, I feel like if people are reacting to things that aren't there anymore, because everything they've said seems positive. And the people that are still unhappy with it don't really have a lot of solid things that they're pointing at. They're just like, I don't know what's going to happen here. I'm holding back my excitement until I see it fully coming out. And that's fair enough, I guess, but a lot of people are very excited by this, and I think that's important. I think you see a lot of people in both that view this game competitively and people that view this game, you know, for fun and narratively. Both sides seem excited by what's coming out. I think there's going to be a lot more parity. I think you're going to see different lists on there. People, a lot of my friends who are Orc and Tyranid players are super excited about these changes that are coming out because it sounds like they're going to be viable again. You're going to see a lot more of them on the table, which I think is fantastic. Because I think the more different types of armies that you see on the table, I think the better this game gets, and the better time that you have seeing the different kind of armies as opposed to playing the same armies back and forth over and over and over again. So that's kind of what I've got my thoughts on 8th edition coming out. A little bit of the information that's coming out. It's going to be changing. They said they're coming out with an article every single day up until release. So there's going to be more and more information coming out. So that doesn't look like they're holding their hands too close to their chest at this point. They're releasing the information bit by bit so we can get an idea of what to expect once it finally drops. So I think there's every reason to be excited about it, and I will continue doing it. And once it does finally come out, I will start making 8th edition battle reports and talking about 8th edition tactics and ideas in these videos going forward. So why don't you guys let me know what you're excited about? Leave a comment down below telling me what what bit of information that came out in the FAQ, or what information that's come out in their articles, or information that's kind of come out through some of the developers on Twitter. What excites you most about 8th edition coming out? Or let me know what reservations you still hold about the system. You know, let me know. Let's have that conversation down there. You know, I don't feel many reservations, but I'm sure there are people out there that do, and I know there are people out there that do. But I think that I personally feel like there's a lot to be excited about, but I still want to hear what you guys have to say down below. And let me know what you want to see coming out in 8th edition. You know, there's certain things that I think that, you know, people talk about making the vehicles more survivable now that they just have wounds that they can be hit by a lasgun. I feel like there's going to be additions to armor saves. I think that, well, they're going to have a saving throw now, which is kind of interesting. And apparently cover just adds, is a modifier to those saves. So, which is kind of cool. So that if you have a Terminator inside of a building, no longer do they choose between their Terminator save or their cover save. They can get a modifier onto their armor save from the cover, which is cool. Which is the way it should be, because shooting a Terminator in a building is a lot harder than shooting a Terminator out in the middle of a field. But I think there's going to be I think there's going to be saves on those vehicles that'll make it harder to take down. You know, which is why there's going to be that addition where it's like, yeah, technically, lasguns can hurt a Land Raider now, but the odds of those wounds going through are very slim. Unless you apparently, if you roll like me, I'm sure I'm gonna go down to a volley of lasguns in a set the first time I run my Land Raider out there. That's just the reality of fill dice, but everyone else should be fine. So, yeah, let me know what you guys think is coming. Let me know what you're excited about. And let me know what your plans are for the coming of 8th edition. Are you just going to keep playing 7th edition, which is fine? I know there's a lot of questions still about what's going to happen with psychic powers and psychic phase. They did mention something about how psychic powers are going to work. They didn't mention how. They just mentioned the act of having a psychic power cast when they talked about command points, which is something that they're adding in there, which is coming out. But yeah, having these command points apparently is going to affect how different powers are cast. So it's going to happen, but I don't know what's going to happen. So let me know what you guys are worried about or what you think is going to happen. I hope you guys have enjoyed this. I got my guys primed up, which is kind of cool. I'll go back and probably have a few little places where I got to retouch them, but the basic prime is down, which is good. So this was a productive deep thoughts thin coat. And I hope that my thoughts were not super rambly. I know they were probably a little bit rambly, and I know there's probably some things I forgot. I can think of some things that I forgot. But just let me know what you guys think down below, and we'll keep the conversation going. I've really enjoyed the kind of conversations that have been sparked through all this. So, until next time, everybody, have fun.